All praises, all praises, all praises to the heavenly, holy, almighty creator of infinity, eternity, the universe, and all there is. This is Revelations.Unveiled. Detroit. Hello, family. We're back together again. And today we are doing a carnal consideration of some of the sociopathy, the psychopathy going on in our society today, in our society today, as we're dealing with this COVID-19 quarantine and containment. And of the many effects we're seeing as we in this American society are dealing with the effects of what some call a pandemic, a social simulation, a fear-mongering tactic to move us into a digital currency. All of those are of valid considerations for all those who partake. And the abuse rates of children and spouses, domestic partners has gone up. The protests are increasing. There is agitation on all sides, representing all ethnic groups. And one of the proliferating behaviors we are continuing to see, and with the greatest level of detriment and danger, specifically to us who are the so-called African Americans or blacks, but who are actually the children of Israel. We are seeing the forces of society raging against us on many fronts. One front is the threat that is unveiling itself as we are coming to the knowledge of our true identity as the Israelites and the people of the book. There is a threat against us now exercising an increased boldness of protest, of social agitation, of civil unrest. There is an increased front to portray us under this so-called scamdemic or plandemic or pandemic, whatever you choose to characterize it. We're trying, or it is being attempted to make us the face of the virus and the disease. And so, as we swing around, one of the common visual and visible enemies to the people are the so-called Karens of society, those who seek to bring harm to the so-called African Americans of society by calling the policing forces with the hopes of stifling, stymieing, stopping, or causing fear to the activities and the general living conditions of our people. So we are going to review an article created by Market Watch, which will hopefully give us a little history and a little science and a little psychology as to why are Karens so angry. Videos and articles of white women losing their cool and confronting black people have taken America and social media by storm. And some people say these memes provide a handle on behaviors which are born out of entitlement and privilege, while others point to economic disenfranchisement. Really? Karens are economically disenfranchised? Okay. What is behind Karen's rage? And so we begin, family. Sometimes they approach with a smile. Other times it's with the rage of angels. About 4 months ago, Terrence Fitzgerald and his two sons, who are 5 and 3 years old, were on a weekend bike ride in his neighborhood, a quiet suburb of Southern California with picturesque houses situated amid generous lawns. My oldest loves nature and stopped all of a sudden, Fitzgerald said. It forced us all to hit the brakes because he was leading us on our little adventure. He saw a cardinal and wanted to show me. The bird sat on a branch on the edge of somebody's property. It was one of those occasions a parent remembers, an ordinary moment when he and his family got to escape the rat race, pause and take a breath to enjoy the simple gifts of nature and fleeting childhood. Blink, and that 5-year-old will be 15. Blink again, he'll be 25. Alas, Fitzgerald remembers the day for another reason. All of a sudden, a truck stopped. A white woman rolled down her window and said, "What's going on here? What are you looking at?" I felt this surge of anger rise within me, he recalled. Fitzgerald, a clinical associate professor of social work at the University of Southern California and the author of Black Males and Racism, Improving the Schooling and Life Chances of African Americans, said he was ready to use a tone of voice his children had never heard before. But I looked at my boys and I realized that I am their role model, and I knew I had to control myself, he says. I simply said, in the smartest ass way possible, "A bird," he said. I gave them the death stare, and the husband said, "Well, all right then," as if he was giving me permission to continue on with my day. He rolled up their window and drove on. This neighborhood is my neighborhood. For a moment, he wondered if he had made the wrong decision in moving there. There are maybe 2 other families of color here, Fitzgerald said. I told my wife we should have never moved into a development with plantation in the name. Well, that was one clue, Brother Fitzgerald. That was a clue, big clue. This is an all too familiar story of a white person policing black neighbors. Karens and Kens have been filmed on smartphones, challenging people of color with increasing regularity. Why are you in the building? Do you live here? Or even, you are not allowed to sell lemonade on this street. Many say these videos, whether featuring Karen or Ken, shed light on racism and ongoing harassment of people of color by white people, sometimes even their neighbors. Meanwhile, some white feminists argue that the Karen video meme has gone too far. It smacks of misogyny and aggressively shames women who are merely having a bad day. Well, you know what? You have to consider the points of view of the other side, family. So, okay, we heard that. Misogynistic, shames women who are having a bad day. Okay. Now, research suggests black people are mistreated based on their race more than white people. Some 65% of black adults say they have been in situations where people acted suspicious of them, compared to just 25% of white adults, according to the Pew Research Center. The Karen phenomena can be roughly split into 2 groups. white people who confront and question people of color, and white people who show antipathy or rage toward authority. Retail and restaurant workers who ask them to abide by social distancing rules and wear face masks, for example, or ask to see the manager. A recent prominent example of the first category is Amy Cooper, who called the cops on May 25th, the same day George Floyd died, in police custody, sparking Black Lives Matter protests, after Christian Cooper, of no relation, asked her to put her dog on a leash in New York's Central Park. That was a rough video, family. She brought out some vicious, wicked rage on brother Christian Cooper. They are neighborhood busybody who has a problem with their black neighbors. Earlier this summer, Fareed Nassor Hayat and Narendra Brown, Hayat's neighbor in Montclair, New Jersey, called the police demanding to see a permit because Hayat and her husband were building a patio in their backyard. This isn't just an argument between neighbors when she's using the power of the state. She's calling on the power of the state to say, hey, I have a knee on your neck, and if you don't submit to me, Fareed Hayat said after the incident, I will call the police. Several white neighbors came to the couple's defense, and the next day there was a protest in the neighborhood in support of the Hayats. So there's another phenomenon. There are people of the white race who are being visually confronted with these episodes, family, and they don't want to be associated with that discrimination and that racism and that hostility. So they are coming out, hopefully with the sincere and genuine intentions of being a source and a resolution to this common problem that us black folk, us Hebrews, experience. Now, some harassment runs the gamut from legal residency and ethnicity to sexuality. Earlier this month, this woman harassed a Latino gardener in California, and when he asked her to step back because she's not wearing a mask, she repeatedly said, "Can you show me your papers?" She called him a mariposa, Spanish slang for homosexual. He told her, "I'm Mexican, I'm Filipino, I'm Chinese. You're funny. You made my day." The other group of Karens and Kens featured in these viral memes and videos gets upset in public places when the rules don't bend to their will. They refuse to wear a face mask, charge store staff at the entrance, cough on patrons, yank masks off racks, and throw their baskets on the floor or groceries out of the carts. And in one particular bizarre case, Costco Karen sat on the floor of a Costco in Hillsboro, Oregon, after declining to wear a mask. "I am an American. I have constitutional rights," she said after requesting to speak to the manager. She sat on the floor. A staff member politely asked her if she would like a chair. White women also call other white women Karen. Take this recent trip to a hairdresser's on Madison Avenue as recounted by Gail, who asked to have her last name withheld. As she was paying her bill, Gail stood at the cash register next to a woman and her dog who had been running around the salon without a leash. and the salon had a no dog sign outside. When asked to use her credit card, the woman refused to put it in the machine herself. "I couldn't possibly do that. I have 4 assistants," she said, according to Gail's account. "My assistants do that for me." The woman also complained about having to social distance and wear a mask, but Gail seemed excited to tell the story. "Is she a Karen? I think I met a Karen." Okay, so white people are also becoming embroiled in the Karen phenomena. Ooh, wonderful. Okay. Now, as it pertains to racial animosities and in the economic disenfranchisements, while white women have been filmed for vehemently refusing to wear masks during the pandemic, black men have been targeted in stores for wearing them. In May 2020, Kim Buckner, a member of the Illinois State Legislature, was stopped by police after leaving a store while wearing a mask. Buckner told a local news station, when it was clear he had bought the items in his possession, the uniformed officer in question told him, "People are using the coronavirus to do bad things. I couldn't see your face, man. You look like you were up to something." It was ironic given the circumstance and given the resistance among some white people to wearing face coverings. I've been programmed to show as much of my face as possible and to use certain cues to disarm anyone who might have learned inclinations to be suspicious of my very presence, Buckner said. It is an indictment on the whole of society for creating a climate where this is normal and this is okay, he added. I can't help but think of the dangers that are inherent for a number of black men who are just adhering to the mask rule and by doing so look like they are up to something. In a paper published in the Michigan Journal of Race and Law last year, Chan Tav McNamara documented a legion of white people calling the police on black people engaged in mundane activities during the summer of 2018. The article, White Collar Crime, White Collar Crime, Racialized Police Communication and Existing While Black, chronicles a litany of such instances ranging from sitting in Starbucks and playing golf to eating in university classrooms. But explaining why a Karen or Ken questions black people who are simply trying to go about their day is an attempt to rationalize the irrational, says Linda Clemens, the CEO of Sisterpreneur, an organization aimed at empowering female entrepreneurs. Children are not born that way, she said. It doesn't come from their core being. It comes from someone who is racist or biased. These divisions go back generations, she added. They're coming out of the woodwork. They were already there. Clemens says she tells white women friends to use their voices to speak up against Karens, Kens, and white supremacy. Use your white privilege to form a human barrier. You know what? I would have them use their white privilege to directly assault those who hold up the tenets of white supremacy. A direct arrow in the eyeball of white supremacy. That has worked in the past, albeit fleetingly, and with mixed results. Black and white farm workers fought side by side for better working conditions and pay in the 1930s with the help of the Southern Tenant Farmers Union, a federation of tenant farmers to push for reform of the rights and the working conditions and pay of sharecroppers and tenant farmers. Women played a critical role in its organization and administration, according to the Central Arkansas Library System of Encyclopedia of Arkansas. But politics and government policies got in the way. Laws and practices in the former Confederate states, such as poll taxes, literacy tests, and grandfather clauses, were introduced to prevent black people from voting, creating a two-tiered system among the blacks and the white workers. Clemens sees the current social climate in the broader historical context of black workers being scapegoated for white Americans' economic ills and personal misfortunes after being exploited as free labor for generations. The White House was built off the labor of slavery and on Native American stolen land, she said. White allies have always been there too, perhaps not in the numbers seen so publicly since the civil rights protests in 1968, Clemens said. But the most recent Black Lives Matter protests, spurred by the deaths of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and many other unarmed black people at the hands of police, have galvanized a new generation of white allies, she added. And it goes on. It says white people feel safer acting antisocially in public. In the 21st century United States, a different set of economic and social fissures have emerged. President Donald Trump has long identified his white, blue-collar base as the forgotten people, those who feel they've been left behind. Globalization and technological advancement have hit manufacturing jobs in many of the pivotal states won by Trump in 2016. The forgotten men and women of our country will be forgotten no longer, Trump said in his election night victory speech. The president-elect may have been paying uncredited homage to a 1932 speech by President Franklin D. Roosevelt that vowed to help the forgotten man at the bottom of the economic pyramid. Given the resentments aired in Karen and Ken videos, they appeared to be divided along political lines. FDR's New Deal in 1933 provided federal support to African Americans, and by the 1930s, most had cut historical ties with the Republican Party. Facing discriminatory labor laws and practices, They threw their support behind Roosevelt and joined with labor unions, farmers, and progressives. FDR's 1936 re-election in a landslide shifted the balance of power in the Democratic Party from its southern bloc of white conservatives to a more diverse field. The most recent spate of videos featuring white people confronting black people for the most innocuous reasons and seeing red when they are asked to socially distance by a store employee comes at another polarizing time in American life, as Black Lives Matter protest sweeps the country. It was funny how, it says they are seeing red or turning red. It just gives me a quick reference back to the holy history in Genesis, and Esau came out red all over as a hairy garment. But I digress. Lillian Glass, a Los Angeles-based communications and body language expert and author of Toxic People, 10 Ways of Dealing with People Who Make Your Life Miserable, says the rage displayed in these videos is displaced and likely originates with a combination of multiple other personal and financial problems. Furloughs, layoffs, the stress of lockdowns, and the re-emergence of the Black Lives Matter movements have left many Karens and Kens feeling insecure and threatened, Glass observes. It's like the perfect storm, she said. And, these statements are made as if us family, the real Hebrews, like we aren't having negative effects and feelings and emotions for this lockdown. We're the first and hardest hit under these scamdemic conditions. So it's like, how dare you? And you have the nerve and such gall to even say such things. Fitzgerald, the USC social worker professor, contends, fear fuels their fire. People who have historically lived in a place of privilege and safety are being told a couple of jarring things that have shaken them to their core, he said. They are not safe. This is a new social justice power pushing them to look in the mirror. They are being told that the supposed fake media and the misguided liberals are to blame for the current state of social and economic turmoil, he adds. These, in fact, are the same people, along with people of color, who are challenging their long-held beliefs of white superiority. Now to Adam Sinnerreich, an associate professor of communication at American University in Washington, D.C. The more interesting dimension of this is the question of who is getting angry about masks, or put another way, why are these people refusing to abide by store rules, nearly always white? Okay. Let's assume that almost everyone is feeling an unusual level of anxiety with the pandemic. Record unemployment, political and social instability, and climate change, Sinnerreich said. Okay. Like climate change, that's a new one you threw in there. Climate change, okay. Why some people feel empowered and entitled to act on this anxiety by publicly defying mask wearing regulations. Why do some people? we shall see, or we conjecture. White people in this country are less accustomed than people of color to having their public behavior subject to regulation, scrutiny, and critique, Centerreich added. That's the purpose of the whiteness, after all. So the enforcement of rules like this may come as more of a shock. It's easier for some Americans than others to let loose and break mandatory mask rules, he said. White people feel safer acting antisocially in public because there is less of a pervasive threat of injury or death as a result, he said, whereas a black person can get killed for jogging or for opening their front door. Now, here's an outline of the cultural history behind the name Karen. This phenomena has jumped from social peanut gallery to the halls of power. Calling 911 to report a fabricated, racially biased emergency would be illegal in San Francisco under a proposal introduced earlier this month called, appropriately enough, the Karen Act. This is the Karen we need. Caution against racially exploitive non-emergencies. San Francisco Supervisor Shaman Walton tweeted. You may wonder why these videos' subjects are called Karen. The name's popularity peaked in the mid-1960s, and given the demographics of the U.S. 60 years ago, one theory is that people named Karen are now mostly middle-aged and white. The apparent genesis of the name's pejoration was a low-key and likely sexist viral post some years back, joking that there's no such thing as a youthful Karen, and that Karens arrive on the scene fully formed, grasping onto anti-vax conspiracy theories, and usually demanding to see the manager. There is some agreement that the name Karen is associated with white women. Karen Atia wrote in the Washington Post that as a kid in South Dallas in the 1990s, she introduced herself to other black kids at the mall. One of them raised an eyebrow and looked puzzled when I told him my name. You don't look like a Karen, he said. That's a white lady's name. My mother, who grew up in Nigeria, named me Karen precisely because she wanted me to blend into white American society and face fewer problems in life than I would have with a foreign or a black sounding name, Ataya wrote. Being a Karen has probably given me some advantages, she said. This is not the first time arrogant white people have been given such sobriquets. In the 19th century, African Americans called condescending white men and women, as well as slave owners and their wives, Mr. Charlies and Miss Anns. What's up, Mr. Charlie? Hello, Miss Ann. It was a covert and safer way of discussing their behaviors. In fact, James Baldwin wrote in a 1964 play titled Blues for Mr. Charlie. It was loosely based on the Emmett Till case, the case of a 14-year-old African-American from Chicago who was lynched in Mississippi in 1955 after he was accused of offending white woman Carolyn Bryant in her parents' grocery store. Carolyn Bryant recanted the accusations decades later after Till's murder. Even some white suffragettes who have been identified as having Karen-esque tendencies in the early American centuries. In America, both the women's rights movement and the black rights movement had their roots in the abolitionist organizations of the early 1800s, and they shared many members, goals, and methods according to one account of color and sex, which is an extensive analysis of that period by historian Whitney Sampson. That all changed by the late 1860s. The leaders of the two movements disagreed completely on the relationship between their movement and the existing political structure, particularly the Republican Party, she added. They also held divergent opinions on why other women or black people need to vote and when enfranchisement should occur. All right, family, so the white women were having an issue with our need or the necessity of black folk to vote and when that ability to get the vote should occur. Ooh, that's snakish in the grass type of operations. All right. Anna Howard Shaw, a white suffragette, turned her back on her black compatriots in the movement. You have put the ballot in the hands of your black men, thus making them political superiors of white women, she said. Never before in the history of the world have men made former slaves the political masters of their former mistresses. So the total flip of the political dynamic where now the black men of that time frame received the vote, it replaced politically that white woman as the number 2 power structure, and they garnered resentments more than likely even up to today, family. In recent times, other names have been used to refer to such individuals, mostly to allow for alliteration. Permit patties, ones who refused to accept that a black family was allowed into a neighborhood pool, and Barbecue Becky, who called the police on a black family having a neighborhood barbecue cookout. And pop culture has made some of these names stick. Sir Mix-a-Lot's Baby Got Back in 1992 featured a Becky who sounded like a stereotypical Valley girl, while Karen surfaced in Dane Cook's 2005 stand-up routine, The Friend Nobody Likes. Every group has a Karen, Cook said. To be fair to Cook, he also said his friend's group had such a person named Brian. So I guess this guy's social group has a Ken in it. Okay, whatever. Whether they're called Karen or Ken or Becky or Brian, Social commentators say the names provide a handle on behaviors born of entitlement, privilege, and disenfranchisement and or rage. Such run-ins with Karens and Kens are not always explicitly, at least, related to race. Karens and Kens are, one might assume, equally angry with their perception of the state of the world. But while the videos people are posting, Karens and Kens are losing their cool in stores and on airplanes and are featuring both men and women. Now, Karens make the news more often than Kens, and people appear to choose to film and or share Karen on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram in much more higher numbers. Okay, good deal. The videos are disturbing, however, and chilling, but also mesmerizing and fascinating. They rack up tens of millions of views online. And back to Brother Fitzgerald at the top of the article. He says the virality of Karen videos ignores the reality that we're gonna take the people of color out. We don't say black folk. Fitzgerald says the virality of Karen videos ignores the reality that black folks deal with being policed by white women and men and are effectively told they're occupying what they regard as their space. As black folk, we have equal negative experiences with both, he said. So why do videos of Karen get more clicks than those featuring men? Who cares, really? But because these scenes take place in clothing stores and supermarkets, place where women still go more than men. It is related to the toxic myth of female hysteria that permeates society, whether at the workplace or the doctor's office. What? I thought there was this so-called myth going around about toxic black male masculinity. When did that get flipped? I missed the meeting on that, family. Or is it a twisted fascination with seeing women misbehave in the context of good girl or ladylike patriarchal stereotypes? Okay, so they're trying to go for intermediate to more advanced analysis of why these videos are being posted and these women are acting out. But to us folk, us black folk, us Hebrew, we know we are simply dealing with the same spiritual bloodline of the slave master, mistress, overseer, and other white folk in society. So this is not any particular change in any behavior. It's just being visualized in abundance where we can catalog with evidence and documentation what we say as it pertains to the savagery and the terror these people impose upon us Hebrews. Recently, the meaning of Karen was said to refer specifically to middle-class, middle-aged white women who are so entitled they ask to speak to the manager when perturbed, but has since morphed into specifically racist women who weaponized. Oh, you know what, fam? Let me go back. For women who are so entitled, they ask to speak to the manager when perturbed. Oh my goodness. When they're perturbed, you know, like when, oh my God, let me speak to your manager, for the fact that the receipt may not print out a machine. But continuing. The term is morphed now, more specifically into that which is a racist white woman who weaponizes white female fragility against largely black men. Megan Murphy, the founder and editor of the feminist Current magazine, wrote in a recent edition. She believes Karen memes and videos have officially gone too far. This connects sexist tropes that claim women use their emotions, vulnerability, and tears to manipulate men. Okay, fam. Now that was a feminist perspective and standpoint and interjection of her opinion, so no problem. Becky, the term, which originated as a means to refer to basic white women, the Uggs wearing, Starbucks buying, pumpkin spice loving kind, is probably young, probably blonde, probably not working class, Murphy wrote. Like Karen, I never found this to be particularly offensive, as I had little desire to defend boring people who love Starbucks. But what was once a joke has become something more egregious. She cites as one of many examples a male driver who identified a woman he described as a Karen, then followed her home and filmed her as she melted down in hysterics, then posted the video online. Her crime: she had flipped him off. The man who filmed the video, who is black and homosexual and in his 20s, describes himself on his own website as more than a viral video star. So this lady, Miss Murphy, she's saying that Caucasian women are now being stalked, per se, by people so they can initiate one of these reactions and catch them going off code on video. Okay, maybe. The man included her license plate in his video. It has since been viewed 11 million times, and he is now selling t-shirts online based on the incident. Hey, the brother was involved in an incident which could have been deadly for him, and it doesn't say he filed any legal proceedings which would have insisted or mandated that she pay him any funds. So he took it upon himself to use his scenario to exercise his capitalistic opportunities. And hey, no hate for that. But Miss Martin says it makes for uncomfortable viewing. The woman in the video tells him to leave her alone. She cowers at the back of her car, attempting to hide her license plate. She screams about what is perhaps now regarded as the ultimate way to bring instant infamy to a white woman who makes a mistake or loses her cool in public. He wants to call me a Karen and put me online, she cried. In a statement, Twitter says it doesn't consider car license plates to be private information under its guidelines and policy, while the apartment complex address is visible too in the video. There isn't a visible set of numbers that can be seen, so it's not something she could request enforcement or action on. And the company declined to comment on the alleged harassment of the woman in the video. So Twitter stepped totally out, around, back away, and from it. Many other such videos lack context, and we often don't get to see what happened immediately before the video started, Murphy said. We all know social media leaves little room for nuance, and far too many people enjoy a rage reaction over asking questions or considering they may not know the full story, she said. So she is advocating on the behalf of fairness for Karen, and that is all good. All perspectives, family, need aggressive advocacy. So no hate, just going along with her view or outlining her viewpoints. The truth is, today, people's lives can be destroyed in an instant via a viral post. And our culture is wielding that power with very little care. Now, on that point, I agree. Us black folk in Hebrew very well know our lives can be destroyed in an instant for no reason, just for simply waking up and existing that day. We can become the victims of so many assaults, physical, spiritual, physical. Some who see Karen and Ken videos and memes as necessary and revealing do acknowledge the sexist element of focusing on white women over white men. Okay, so they still want to revel in the feminist sexist energy. We live in a sexist society, so of course, any kind of public shaming will have a gendered element, Sinnerike said, one of the earlier commentators. Men and women express violence differently, he added. Okay. Men may be more willing or likely to start a physical altercation, engage in domestic abuse, or to vandalize property. Oh, okay. Hold on. Start altercation, engaging. You know what? I'm going to have to say that percentage may be falling into an equal range about now in today's society, but we'll continue. It may be that calling the perpetrators of these incidents by the gender term Karen is a tacit acknowledgement that the form of acting out they are engaging in is one that is more frequently designated as an appropriate or expected form of antisociality for women. Oh my God. A long way to say we're acknowledging that this is an appropriate way for white women to act. Okay. The locale may be part of that, Sinnerike added, but so may be the nature of the acting out, such as disrupting normal business processes like checkout lines and delegating violence by proxy to institutions, which is calling cops on a bird watcher who asks you politely to leash your animal. In her seminal article, When White Women Cry, semantics scholar Mamta Matwani Akapati examined the complex relationship to social justice and diversity between white and black women. She examined awkward moments between black and white women at workplaces and educational institutions. What she found, this dual oppressor-oppressed identity often becomes a root of tension when white women are challenged to consider their white privilege by black women. That is to say, such conversations between white and black colleagues about race don't always go so well. She cited a case study involving Anita, a black woman who raised a concern about the lack of support offered to her community from an office where Susan worked. Susan began to cry and said she felt attacked. Anita reassured Susan that her comments were not directed at her personally. And instead of discussing the issue of support or lack of diversity programs, the group spent its time consoling Susan. Susan later reported to both of their she reported Anita to both of their respective managers. So that's one of the common tricks or calamities when trying to have an honest conversation with these people, family. Susan flipped out, started crying. Everybody felt sorry for her. Oh, please calm down. What's the matter? Then she turned around and did another snake in the grass behavior by reporting the sister who simply was raising awareness. She reported her to the management, and most likely that usually comes with some documentation, or now the eye is on the brothers and the sisters of the office. All right. Stephanie Younger, an 18-year-old activist, says the Karen phenomena is not misogynistic or sexist. In her essay for the Black Feminist Collective, the backlash against Karen memes is peak white feminism, she wrote. While white women have the privilege of being called a Karen for enforcing oppression against marginalized people, black women and girls are labeled as angry because of their race. White women, before you get defensive, when we hold you accountable for weaponizing your privilege, Younger wrote, remember that black girls are the ones who are being erased and marginalized. Now, Karens and Kens and Beckys and Bryans allow people to see racism and white privilege running wild. It makes most folks feel better about themselves. Thank God I'm not like that, and laugh at the absurdity of people trying to assert their own perceived power in a very public setting. But the most ingrained kind of racism and white supremacy are neither amusing nor so obvious. For example, both white and black communities are struggling with coronavirus-induced job loss and concerns of getting sick. But black folk frequently experience discrimination in jobs and healthcare and housing, the kind of systemic racism not so easily captured in a 4-minute video. Indeed, some encounters with Karens and Kens can be less public displays of emotion and more cat and mouse. Lisa Alexander, the CEO of LaFace Skincare and now known as San Francisco Karen, and her partner Robert Larkins walked up to a neighbor, James Juanillo, in June. They were not happy Juanillo, who describes himself as a proud Filipino, was writing Black Lives Matters in yellow chalk on a gray retaining wall in the Pacific Heights area of San Francisco. With a veneer of chilly politeness, they told him he was breaking the law. Alexander asked, "Hi, is this your property?" I'm asking you if this is your property. When Juanillo suggested that they didn't know who lived there, Alexander raised her index finger to her chin apologetically and said, we actually do know. That's why we're asking, because we know the person who does live here. There was one not insignificant problem. Alexander was lying. Juanillo had lived in the property since 2002 and clearly decided to let the absurd and cringe-worthy scenario play out. She was scarier than the other one, said Denise Dudley, a San Luis Obispo, California-based author and workplace consultant. I remember that. That lady did show up. She was like the character in the movie Carrie. She had a chilling, almost like she just instantly appeared there and started to question him. It reeked of evil and wickedness. Yes, that was a memorable video. It was not clear why Alexander or Larkins assumed that Juanillo did not own the property, nor why they would have pretended that they were friends with the owner. But one theory as to why Alexander and Larkins approached Juanillo is that in a predominantly white, wealthy neighborhood like Pacific Heights, where the median price home is valued at $2 million according to Zillow, they incorrectly assumed that he did not live there. Feeling secure in that assumption, they clearly felt confident enough to lie and say they did know who lived in Juanillo's large home. Alexander released a statement after Juanillo's video went viral on Twitter, where it was viewed more than 23 million times. I want to apologize directly to Mr. Juanillo, she wrote. There are not enough words to describe how truly sorry I am for being disrespectful to him. She added, I should have minded my own business. The last 48 hours has taught me that my actions were those of someone who is not aware of the damage caused by being ignorant and naive to racial inequalities. Nowhere in her apology did Alexander use the word racist or racism. One other factor that may contribute to Karen's in the videos, emotional expressions by women tend to come under greater scrutiny than those by men, wrote the authors of Constrained by Emotion, Women, Leadership and Expression, Emotion in the Workplace, a chapter in the 2016 Handbook on Well-Being of Working Women. Women incur social and economic penalties for expressing stereotypical masculine emotions because they threaten society's patriarchal barriers. Researchers Jacqueline Smith, Victoria Bresco, and Aaron Thomas wrote. Dudley said women, whether they are white or black, are encouraged by society to withhold their anger, while men are encouraged to withhold their tears. Women are judged for being emotional, she said. We're considered to be difficult when we get angry, whereas men are perceived as being tough and powerful. Research has actually suggested that men who get angry are perceived as strong and decisive, while women are seen as hysterical. I understand that. That, Dudley said, could go in some ways in explaining why these Karens seem to trigger more social media viewers than Kens. Whatever the underlying reasons why some white women and men are captured on video raging against mask mandates and black folks they meet on the street, Dudley says the moniker serves a useful purpose. It allows people to call out entitled, unacceptable behavior. McNamara also agrees. A problem which is not named cannot be solved. Violence is neither acknowledged nor understood and cannot be prevented. Hidden pain and undiagnosed injuries cannot be healed, she concluded in her Michigan Journal of Race and Law paper. In the most fortunate cases, social media is a powerful tool to bring a reckoning to those who are a public nuisance or white folks who call cops on black neighbors. It provides an important record of the event and often leads to public backlash, worldwide opprobrium for the Karen or Ken videos, the loss of financial and professional repercussions, and the continuing shame for the unacknowledged racist and implicit biases. Now, while filming the test exchange with the San Francisco Karen, managed to keep his cool and his sense of humor. And as he walked away, he told his millions of future viewers, and that, people, is why Black Lives Matters. That's Karen, and she's calling the cops. And this is going to be really funny because she knows the people who live here personally. All right, family, that was the end of the article. And so I guess I give some insights onto Karen's behavior, but like we said, us Hebrews, we know the deal on these people. Maybe this gives them the opportunity to find out about themselves. So we know we are dealing with a spirit of wickedness and a spirit of viciousness, perceived superiority, whereas there's an institutional mechanism to keep us disenfranchised and terrorized and at the bottom rungs of society. So we've been known about Karens and Kens and Beckys and Bryans and Melissas and Megans and so forth and so on. So this was just a formalized version for us to take a look at Karen and Becky and get, I guess, a generalized profile of their behavior. But we, as the humble Hebrews, the 12 tribes of the house of Jacob, we will continue to strive in reason and rationale, righteousness. We will continue to operate in accordance with justice, and we will treat our brothers with the best behavior as we would want to be treated. So family, this was an outline on the Karen catastrophe and the apocalypse. And we will return to continue with the other series of the channel, the Maccabees, the prophets of our holy history, the lynching of black veterans. And so, until we reconvene again in love and safety and comfort, I love you. I love you. I love you. This is Revelations.Unveiled. Detroit.